Steve Beecham. I have been looking forward to interviewing you. I don't even know how many years now that I think about it. You're like the mayor of my town for anybody listening in. You're about to be privileged to listen to Steve Beecham. Now, before he says anything and you're listening in, you need to know I just might. Some people say I have a Southern accent, and we're technically South Georgia, which is North Florida, because I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. But when I talk to Steve Beecham, sometimes I just gravitate, start talking country. So I'm going to try not to, Steve, but you have a little influence on me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Casey. So glad to be here with you.
My gosh. Can you believe we're doing this together? How many years have you known me, or we've known each other?
Probably since I've been in the mortgage business, back in the 90s is when I got in it. So I think were you already in it?
I think I was in it. Oh, yeah, I was in it in the 90s. Oh, heck yeah, I was in it in 84. That'll age a little bit.
So you were before me, but yeah, right after I got in the mortgage business, you worked for the big gorilla in town, right? And everybody knew who you were. So you were a living legend.
I was a living legend. Well, here I am. Can you believe now? Sales and leadership, culture training. I'm impacting companies around the country, outside the space, in the space, blessed beyond measure. And I wanted you as a guest on an excellent company because of the depth. Steve, I've watched you from afar. For people who don't know you, I want them to get to know you here for a moment, but anyone listening in, when you meet this man, he's what I call the connector. A lot of people that have met him, or that I've met that have met him, I'm like, how do you know Steve? And no one can ever remember how we met you. They just all know you. And there's so much wisdom you have, because we had a great time having lunch recently. And every time I asked a question, you're like, yeah, I know him. Yeah, I know him. So I want to hear your story. How in the world did you go from wherever you've been to where you are today? Can you sort of give me a little bit of your story?
Well, the shortcut is I was not a good student. And I was when I was in college, I wanted to join the fraternity, and they told me I couldn't join the fraternity unless I tried out for cheerleading. Now, mind you, there were no guy cheerleaders. So me and a couple of my fraternity brothers all got inebriated and went over to the cheerleading tryout. And then the cheerleading coach begged us to stay because she would have loved to have some guy cheerleaders. And there was this one really pretty girl there. And I said, I'll stay and I'll be a guy cheerleader if you make that girl my partner. And Mary and I have now been married for 30 something years.
No,
so
I did not know that.
She was smart. And so she stayed in school, but she was older than me. And when she graduated, I was about to flunk out. So she had a really big job, got a nice job at IBM. And I was just trying to figure out, who I was going to be, where I was going to be, and all that. Anyway, long story short, I got into the clothing business. I taught my dad and invested in the clothing business. During those days, I was a little bit more of a dresser than I am today. Today, I'm just like sweatpants. But anyway, I did the clothing business for a while, and I learned how to not make money. And then I did a going out of business sale, and I got fabulously wealthy. In 3 months, I made more money than I did the previous 8 years. And then I went around the country doing going out of business sales. And then I got into the garbage business because a fraternity brother of mine said that you can make a lot of money picking up garbage because nobody else wanted to do it. And I got into doing that. Was the first guy in my area to do recycling. So when I was doing that, I was going door to door. That's the first business I ever had where I go knock on the door and say, hey, can I pick up your garbage? Before that, I had a retail store, which is where I learned how to do flyers and build relationships, take data on people. You'd come in and buy a suit, and I'd write down your waist and all, and then I'd call you back and say, hey, you got the new fall lineup in, And then I got into the shutter business, the plantation shutter business. And we started selling plantation shutters all over the Southeast. A buddy of mine, my best friend, was manufacturing them. And I went to work for him. And that's when I started opening up retail stores and started going to people's house. So we would run an ad in the paper. They would call and we would go set up an appointment. We would go to the appointment, and that's where we had to sit down in front of them and outsell whoever else they were competing with and try to get a big check from them, even though we were in Jacksonville, Florida, selling a lady shutters, and the plant was all the way back in Atlanta. And they're like, "Are you sure you're going to come back?" You know. And then I was I think that's all I did. And then I needed a loan for my first house, and I went to a guy my Rotary Club said, "Go see my brother," and that was Donnie Crane. I'm sure you probably know Donnie Crane, and he had a mortgage company. And I went to see Donnie to get my mortgage. He said, "Man, you need to come to work for me." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't want to wear a coat and tie." And back then, everybody wore a coat and tie. He's like, "Oh, you'd be good." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to do that." So then that weekend, I'm at a party, and a friend of mine walks up and says, "Hey man, I lost my job. I'm looking for a job." I said, "Well, call this guy. He tried to hire me today." He said, "Does he like to hunt and fish?" I said, "Yeah, he had a deer head and a fish on his wall in his office." And so he went to work for him. And about 3 months later, we had one of those first big drops, refinance drops, like in the early 90s. And my buddy's calling me, goes like, "Man, I made $5,000 this week." And then the next week, "I made $10,000 this week." And it just got to be stupid money. And I told my wife, I said, I've never taken a job because of money, but we're having kids, and I need to do that. So I went and let him hire me in the mortgage business. And the next day the refi quit, and I was 6 months before I did a loan. And then that loan was my brother's loan. And then I went 3 more months before I did a loan. And then the rates dropped again, and I started doing loans. And then I took all of that data and put that into what I do today. All the stuff I learned from all those different businesses, the things that worked, the things that didn't work, I put all that data in there. So now what I've got is sort of a mom and pop mortgage business where my whole goal is just to take care of my village. And I've been doing it for 30 something years and absolutely love it.
30 some years.
Yeah.
And you call it your little mom and pop operation in the local community. And for anybody listening in that's looking at building a business, this man has done it and done it well. You even have a branded truck.
I used to have, when the Hummers came out, remember they had that, they had the H1, H2, and H3. When the H1 came out, I told my wife, I said, "I want to get one of those and logo it up." And they were like, back, I don't know when it was, but it was like $60,000, and that was like real expensive. And so this friend of mine had one, and I said, "Hey man, can I rent your Hummer from you for 2 weeks to test it out?" And so he rented me his Hummer for like $2,000, which was like crazy. And I drove around in that yellow Hummer with Hometown Mortgage on the side of it, and people went nuts. Kids would run up to me at the ball fields. It was crazy. So I still didn't have the money to buy one. And then 2 years later, the H2 came out. I bought one of those. I drove the wheels off of that thing. It was logoed up. There was not anybody in this town that didn't know about Hometown Mortgage because they saw that yellow Hummer coming down the road. And then my kids started driving. And then the police would call me and go, "Hey, your kid's over here at this party." Because you couldn't miss it. So the Hummer, we finally just drove it in the ground. Well, actually, my son ran over a police car at a red light so that didn't go over too well. And so I had to get rid of the Hummer. And then about 2 years ago, I bought an old pickup truck. So now the Hummer attracted all the little kids. Now this old 66 pickup truck, it attracts all the older people. All the people our age are like, "Man, is that a 57 or a 62?" And it's great. I don't know why. It's one of my best advertising things that I do, and why more people don't logo up something cool is beyond me if they have a small business.
The key you just said, it's something cool.
Yeah.
You don't want to logo up a little Civic.
No, it needs to be something cool.
Cool. Right.
Like a Mini Cooper or an old truck or whatever. But
now, what is your truck?
It's a 66 Chevrolet side step or whatever. I can't remember.
It's beautiful, by the way.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. Anybody listening in, you're gonna have to check it out. All right. So Steve, I heard you, by the way, how you got where you are today, but there was something that you had where you went garbage business, the shutter business. I mean, you just have always figured out how to make money.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm real big on, you really need to believe deeply in what it is you're doing. It's got to be purposeful. And so I did things that felt right to me, and I always felt like I could figure out a way to make money doing it. And I always felt like there were learning experiences. Ironically, the business I ended up in, I took because of money, and then I figured out how to make it fun. Business is fun when you're making money. It's when you're not making money when it's not fun.
True.
For me. And so you have to figure out a way. So I'm real big on purpose. And when we had our crash in 2009, I lost everything I had, and I had built up a pretty good situation, and it all went away. And so I had to start all over. I like to say it got so bad that my family, I had to take my family and move into my mom and dad's basement, back into my old bedroom. That's how bad it was. And so that experience made me rethink about, well, why am I doing this? And so I really got into studying purpose. And so I believe that a lot of people change jobs because they're not getting their life purpose out of their job. So it's not really where they're working. It's just that the desk or the way they're doing their job is not fulfilling them. And so to give you an example, so my life purpose is to help people get from where they are right now to where they want to go. And so that's the lens that I view everything through. So when somebody now comes in for a mortgage, I'm thinking, hey, they're living here and they're trying to live over here. My job is to help them do that. Or I run into somebody in town and I say, how's business? They say business is slow. And I'm thinking, well, their business is here. How do I help them get over here? So that's the lens that everything I look at is that way. And when I had that happen to me in 2009 and I started changing and doing it, I started getting a little less aggressive about, my goals and my issues. I got more aggressive about my goal was to try to see how many people I could help. And so my sort of my mantra, I guess it is now, is I want to be Santa Claus for the person in front of me. And so everywhere I go, every interaction I have, my whole function is to be Santa Claus for the person there. So I'll give you an example. I was at this function last weekend, and this guy sitting beside me was a date of another friend of mine. And they had kind of just broken up, but because they had already booked this function, she brought him along anyway. So he's sitting there and he's like this, And so I said, man, you don't look like you're having a good time. He's like, there's too much action in this room. And I said, what do you mean there's too much action? He said, well, I'm kind of a military guy. I was kind of special forces kind of guy. And there's a lot going on. People are all around moving the room. He said, that kind of freaks me out a little bit. And I said, man, I see this is fun. He said, you see it as fun? I said, yeah. I said, all these people that we can help. He goes, help them do what? And I said, we're going to just think, man, there's somebody here we can be Santa Claus for today. And he goes, Santa Claus? I said, yeah. And then about 5 minutes later, he looks up at me, he goes, Santa Claus? And I said, yeah, you want me to show you an example? And he said, yeah. I said, I'll be right back. So I walk over to the police chief who's there in the room. And I say to the chief, I said, who's the baddest dude in this room? He said, oh, that guy over there. So I walk over to this guy and I said, hey, man, were you in the military? And he said, yeah. I said, what branch? He said, Air Force. I said, come with me. So I take him over to this guy, and this other guy's name is like Jim. So I said, Jim, meet Johnny. Johnny, meet Jim. Y'all both Air Force. Well, these two guys are like locked down having this conversation. And I finally just got between the two of them. I said, if you two dudes start French kissing, I'm going to wear you both out. I mean, they were like in a man hug, And then he sits back down and he goes, I get this Santa Claus thing, man. That's cool. And that made my night. I don't know if it made his night, but it sure as hell made my night. And that's the way I look at it.
Man, I now have a whole different lens on you.
Well, Casey, DC calls me and says, hey, Casey and I are going to lunch. Will you come? So we sit down at lunch. What did we do? I said, what do you need? What are you trying to get to?
You did. That was all you focused on was me.
And I gave you everything I had.
I know.
I don't want anything in return, because I believe that if I give out enough stuff, of enough wows, enough love, that some of that will come back to me. I
Wow.
believe that 100%.
Well, 100%, I can tell you of all the people that I've run
Well, I'm
into.
on the podcast because I gave you some.
I know, because you helped me and you didn't ask for anything in return. And I got to be really honest with you. At that moment, so again, anybody listening in, he and I had lunch, and I was asking for some connections and introductions. And I walked away. I just want you to know, I walked away going, man, he did that so willing. I didn't even have to sell him on it. He just was like, what do you need? What do you need help with? And I did not know you had the mentality of Santa Claus. And I'm going to tell you, there's so much wisdom in that, because we do sales training, and everybody wants the golden goose, the golden nugget. What if I just, what's the magic words or the magic script, or how do I overcome this objection? And I'm like, first of all, do you even know what they need? And if they don't need you, do you really want to sell them something that they don't need? Because you're at stake, your relationship, your brand, your company's reputation. You want to serve them and be Santa Claus. Find out, what are you up to today? How are you?
Don't expect anything in return. If you're doing it for that, you're doing it for the wrong reason. But here's a really cool thing that I learned. So right now, this phone is the most important thing I own, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is my young guys, I'll say, I'll get their phone and they'll look and it'll say Ryan, Jim, Sally, Sue. It doesn't even say nothing else. It's just their friend's first name. And I say, what you need to do is go through your phone, and everybody in your phone, what you need to do is call Sue and say, hey, Sue, what is a great referral for you? What is something, if I'm doing mortgages and I've got all these customers I'm helping, what am I looking for that I can send to you? What do they need to say? And Sue might say, well, anybody that needs artwork, or anybody that needs, a certain kind of dress, or whatever they're doing. And so what we do now, what I teach people is, in your phone, don't just put down Sue, and then maybe you put down Macy's, but then you need to put down, women's, 20 to 30 dresses, or get as specific on that person as you can. Like a guy called me today and said, hey, I need some help on a business contract. I'm gonna sell my business. So I type in attorney business contract. 6 people show up, because these attorneys, I ask them a deep enough question to try to get to their sweet spot, so that when I send them that referral, they go, wow. Because every time somebody goes, wow, then reciprocity kicks in, and then they're trying to figure out how they can pay you back.
Oh my gosh.
If I just have attorney and I call and they say, well, yeah, I appreciate it, Beach, but I'm really a divorce attorney. Well, that's my fault.
Right. How many presents do you think you've delivered to Santa Claus over the past, say, 10, 20 years?
I would say a minimum of 1 a day to probably 2 a day.
Wow.
I've already done 3 today.
You've already done 3.
Let me tell you the
measure of success is.
I'm gonna tell you the first one. Okay.
All right,
so
give it to me.
I've got this house that I remodeled. It's an old 1930s house that I remodeled. People walk by on the sidewalk. It's in downtown area. People walk by on the sidewalk, and so I can see them out of my office, and they'll stop and they'll talk. And so I see these 2 ladies standing on the sidewalk, and they're kind of pointing at my house. So I walk out of there. I walk out and I say, hey, what are you pointing at? I'm curious, And she's like, I'm telling her she needs to use that color for her front door. And I said, well, do you need that color? And she said, I would love to have. We were just debating, do we knock on your door or not? So I go in there. So it's only like 50 people have asked me for that. I got the chips, I'm like, give her the chip. I mean, I don't know what it is about the color on our front door, but after the first 7 or 8, I said, Mary, go to Benjamin Moore and get a whole bunch of stack of chips. And I can't remember that it's a blah, blah, blah color. And then she's like, we're going to redo a house. I'm like, well, come on in. You know, and so I just invite this lady in my house, complete stranger. And then she says, you're in the mortgage business, aren't you? And I said, yes. She said, well, we're building a house. Do I need to call you? And I said, I would love for you to call me. I'd love to help you on that. All from a lady's pointing, trying to figure out what my paint color is.
Okay, so what made you have that, I'm going to say internal fortitude, 2009, to not quit? Because you'd been in the garbage business, you've been in the shutter, you've had all this experience. What made you stick to it?
I don't know. I think, you know, in that time period, I read a stat that we lost 90% of the people that were mortgage brokers during that time. And I just kept, that's kind of what my third book's about, is what's the conversation you're having with yourself. And I have a friend, there's a kid that I went to high school with, and he was a sort of a short kid. You know, he's a little guy, but he was the best athlete in this whole area of town. He played football, basketball, and baseball. I remember that the basketball coach bet the tennis coach that this kid could come out and whip their best tennis player, even though the kid had never played tennis before, which he did. He went out and whipped the best tennis player. Anyway, long story short, he ends up in Major League Baseball, goes to 2 World Series, has this fabulous career. And I run into him at a reunion, and he kept saying, I asked him, I said, Tony, are you still married or divorced, or what's your situation? He said, Beach, my wife and I are separated right now, but we're going to get back together. Because he said, because Beach, my stuff always works out. And I heard him say that 50 or 60 times in the 2 or 3 days I was around him. He kept saying to himself, my stuff always works out. And it dawned on me, that's why this little kid who didn't have an education, he was talented, but he kept saying, I'm going to fight through this thing. In essence, I'm going to make something happen. And so I adopted that saying. And so that's one of my favorite sayings right now. So when something happens, I say, my stuff always works out. It's going to work out.
It always works out. You know, it's interesting. There's actually a study that was done. I don't know if you've read the book, Boundaries for Leaders by Dr. Henry Cloud, but he said there's only 2 things that are different. Only 2. Listen carefully. From the good to the great, from the average to the extraordinary. What's the difference? There's only 2 things that are different from those that are good and those that are exceptional. One is they believe. They believe in where they're going. They believe in themselves. They believe they will be successful. They believe in their goal, their product, their service. They believe, which I was like, oh man, my mama between my ears, you know, since I was a little girl, told me I was going to be successful. I was going to be the best at whatever I did. So I believed it. I couldn't help not to. I still believe it. And then number 2, the only difference, number 1 is they believe. Number 2 is they prioritize making it happen. They literally,
it's important.
You just do the key things every day that will push you forward in your career. If you focus on all the things you can't control, you're distracting yourself from what you can control, and that is you. So what do you prioritize? So tell me about your first book. What was the title of it?
Well, I want to tell you this while we're on that, because this changed my life. So I read an article that Adam Grant had written. Are you familiar with Adam Grant?
No, tell me about him.
Psychologist. Is I can't think of his big, but he's Brene Brown's got him on her podcast with Simon Sinek right now. But he said that in his research that he labeled that he made up this label called a humble narcissist. He said that is the most successful people in the country are people who are humble narcissists. And basically what I started thinking about that, and I go, you know what? If you're the guy that says to yourself, I should be the president of the United States of America. I mean, that's a pretty strong internal conversation. So you think about, like, you know, the Bushes and Obama and Clinton and all those guys, but they were humble enough they were narcissistic enough to believe that they should be running the show, right? But they were humble enough to not let that get in the way. You know what I'm saying? And then Trump comes along. He's just a straight out narcissist. He's not humble. He's just a narcissist. But it changed everything for me, because what it did is it gave me the internal power to feel more confident. See, I don't have the same confidence that you have internally. I have to build my confidence. I have confidence in certain areas like everybody. You have a superpower.
Sure.
Right. So, I mean, I can get out of a car and walk up to a complete stranger with all the confidence in the world and figure out whatever I want to talk to them about or where I want to go. But to think that I should do certain other things, I have to build my own confidence up. But so I'm beginning to understand that it's okay for me to tell myself, you are really good at what you do, or you are the best at what you do, or you know the subject better than anybody else, which comes back to me when I coach people that are asked to speak or they want to speak. And I tell them, I said, if I brought you to the soccer field for my 6-year-old soccer, I'm coaching 6-year-old soccer kids, could you coach them? And everybody goes, well, yeah, I mean, because whatever knowledge you have is way more than they have. I said, but if I ask you to come coach the Atlanta United soccer team, would you come help me with that? And they go, no, those guys are better. And I said, that's the way speaking is. If you stay in your lane on what your superpower is and what you're really smart at, then you have to understand that most of the people in the room don't know what you know. And if you understand that, then you can give a good speech, because 100%. you've got a knowledge, a superpower, an understanding of these little pieces of subjects where you're smarter than 95% of the people that you meet.
Well, it's interesting to me because I am confident. My mama gave me a great talk track in my head for sure, but it doesn't mean I don't have self-doubt. Doesn't mean, my mama told me from the time I was little, you're special. You are going to do great things in your life. You need to be your very best at whatever you do, and you will be. And so, I mean, I don't have an option. I can't be number 2. I got to be number 1 at whatever I do. So God forbid if you're in front of me. She forgot for me to take everybody with me, by the way. So I had to learn that over time, that it isn't about me, that God did gift me with certain elements and I need to bring everybody with me. So I'm all about, let's help every human being that's listening in, whether you're a CEO or a sales rep or operations, it doesn't matter what you're doing, but you've got to be the best. If you're not going to be the best, what are you going to be? Average? Who wants to join the average team, by the way? I ask every CEO I meet, like, okay, so are y'all going to be number 1? What's your vision? What's your goal? And if you don't say, I'm going to be number 1, I'm like, I don't know if I want to join you. I want to join the team that wants to win the Super Bowl. And by the way, how do you attract good talent? You go, I want to win the Super Bowl.
But do you think, so what I'm beginning to believe is it doesn't have to be number 1, like in, like the Business Chronicle list. No,
I can be number 1
in customer service.
Yes.
You got to have something that you say, nobody does this piece better than me.
Nobody does this better than me. That's the key. And I mean, but I still have the self-doubt. Are you capable? Can you do it? All that. But you know what? I know the talk track. And I'm like, nah, you're capable.
My mom used to always say, just be nice, Steve. Just be nice.
Isn't that
so
fun?
That's kind of where I came from, is I just want to be nice to people.
Well, my little 92-year-old mama, I just interviewed the other day and I said, Mama, what's the key to success? She goes, just be nice to people. You're 92 years old. Just be nice to people, in her little Puerto Rican accent. Listen, I could talk to you forever. I'm going to go be Santa Claus to somebody by posting this video. But I want to bring you back because I want to talk about book 1, book 2.
Hey, I want to say one thing. This bothers me. This is something I've learned recently about kind of like, I think I told you about my friend Ben Ortlett that talks about, it's culture, it's craft, community, and cost. And this has been a game changer for me. So what happens is, as CEOs or owners or whatever, we get involved in the community, the exterior community, and then we come up with ideas or things that we want to do to get our employees invested in, like, hey, let's all go do a Habitat for Humanity house.
Right.
And so what I've rethought this last year was, I'm dragging them into my cause. I need to be drug into their cause. I need to go. So I remember I went to Letha, that's my bookkeeper, and I'm like, what are you interested in? What do you spend your nonprofit time on, or your extra energy? And so she's in this, she likes this place where the lady rescues monkeys and apes that have been used for testing and stuff. And she just loves that. And I said, how can I help? So I gave her like $500. Hometown Mortgage gave her $500. I mean, that was way more important than me saying, hey, come along and let's do this that I want to do. And so I started doing that with all my people. I think it's a game changer for a leader to go to the people and say, I know I want to be invested in what you're invested in.
What's important to you?
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I'm excited right now because one of our, we call them associates, not employees. One of our associates is right now going to be running not the Boston Marathon. Is the Boston Marathon? He's going to be running a marathon, and he's raising money for 2 service dogs. And I'm like, how cool is that? That we're going to gift a service dog to a veteran who just needs help in long-term recovery. Because I'm really big, as you know, really big about the community and giving back. And really, we offer every quarter where our associates can take time off to go serve in their community, and they can decide what they'd like to do. So I think it's a game changer as well. I think, we're not the generation. I don't know if you have, Steve, we're similar age. We weren't brought up in a generation of go do causes or go be active in your community. It was almost like everybody do your own thing. And this generation that's being brought up right now is taught to get involved. And so the fact that we're doing it right now, I don't think we won 25 culture awards by accident. I think it's a lot of love, value, care for your people. When I think about the legacy that we'll leave, right? Leave people better than you found them. That's every person who ever meets me will say that they left better than before they met me. So
I'm better already today, just being here with you.
I know, you're so sweet. I just love you. Did I get into my country accent at all? I don't know if I did or not, but I just love you. You had so much wisdom in there, and there's so much for people to listen to. Any leader listening in, send this to your salespeople and say, start being Santa Claus. Quit looking for all the gifts for themselves, right? They're just looking under the tree going, is there anything there for me?
It cures cold calling. If I go to a door and I think about, I don't care if they buy anything from me, I want to figure out how I can help them, then there's never a cold call.
Right.
They can't tell you no and hurt your feelings because you didn't go in asking for anything.
It all comes back tenfold. I call it bring value, bring value, bring value. You call it Santa Claus. I like them both, but personally, I think I like Santa Claus a lot more. How much fun is that? All right. Well, I'm going to have you back because I want to talk about book 1, book 2, the book you're reading, right? And I've got to interview you. I'm going to do this one really soon. I want to interview you about your bottles and brainstorming, since I got to attend it, because I think it's a game changer for people listening in that are in sales. And leaders, this is something so easy for your salespeople to do. So watch for a post called Bottles and Brainstorming. Casey is interviewing Steve Beecham about his little trick of the trade of how to bring your community together and how to win big. I love you, man.
I love you too.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, glad to be here.